Hi, it's Mitch from PickDawgz.com, and it is Wednesday, May 22nd, 2022, here with today's first halves and first 5 innings. Of course, the way this video works is we go through all of the relevant first halves and the first 5 innings of all of today's Major League Baseball action. So we roll into college football, college basketball. We won't be able to cover all the first halves, but we're still going to have a very robust programming here. Of course, a feature of this show, we're always going to go over a first on this date in history as well. Today, well, 1980, the first edition of Pac-Man was released. I know a lot of gamers here in our PickDawgz crew and PickDawgz family. Man, your life is probably totally different, all because of what happened on May 22nd, 1980. But anyways, what's going to happen today on May 22nd, 2024, we're going to kick the book's butts, get off to a fast start doing first halves and first 5 innings. For the first pick of this video, we're going to go to the NBA, to the Western Conference Finals, where it's the Minnesota Timberwolves hosting the Dallas Mavericks. Big shoes to fill after last night's exciting Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Final. But both these teams, when it comes to the first half, these guys have really not gotten it done. The Timberwolves have been a great first quarter team, and the Mavs, it seemed, when they have that bad quarter that cost them the game, it normally happens in the first half. The Mavericks have only hit the first half money line 43 of their last 94 games. That's a minus 18% ROI. Meanwhile, the Timberwolves have hit the first half in only 42 of their last 84 games. That's a minus 16% ROI. This is one of those where we're just going to roll with the lesser of two evils. Neither of these teams really get out of the gate fast, but boy, when it's money time in the second half, look out, and that's where I expect this game to get really, really interesting. But when it comes to the first half, it's going to be a lean to the Timberwolves, and that's going to be our pick. For our next game, we go to Washington, where the Nationals are taking on the Twins. The Twins took out some frustration on the Nationals on Tuesday, really knocking them around the park and cashing our first 5 innings pick that we gave out. But in this one, it's Simeon Woods Richardson on the mound for the Twins and Jake Irvin on the mound for the Nationals. We've seen Irvin have some really good stuff, especially that game against the Dodgers in LA where he blanked them. But outside of that, he has definitely been giving up some runs. He hasn't been horrible this season, but he definitely has been hit. Woods Richardson has been very sharp, and really he's only been touched up one time. That was 2 starts back against the Toronto Blue Jays where he gave up 5 runs. He doesn't go very deep into games, but that's really not a problem here. Neither of these teams are hitting all that well, with the Nats hitting 200 this season and the Twins hitting 206. And when it comes to hitting against right-handed pitching, well, they're even worse, as the Nats are at 195 and the Twins at 179. Neither of those things factor, but I think in this one, Woods Richardson just a better option. I'm going to take the Twins, and that'll be our pick for this game. For our next game, we go to Cleveland, where the Guardians take on the Mets. We cashed with the Guardians on Tuesday, but boy, what a wild ride that game was. And I'll tell you, I think today's game, probably not as wild. We got Tristan McKenzie going for the Guardians, and it's Jose Quintana on the mound for the Mets. You know, Quintana really hasn't played at the top of his game this season. He's been hit pretty hard. Meanwhile, McKenzie, after a little bit of a rocky start, is starting to return to form and has become back to the form of the emerging superstar that we've seen most of the times that we've seen McKenzie. When it comes to hitting, the Guardians are hitting 219 as a team, and the Mets are hitting 247. And when it comes to hitting righties, the Mets are hitting them at 259, while the Guardians hit lefties at 243. I think this is one of those games that, while those stats, say that, maybe the matchup favors the Mets, what the matchup that doesn't favor the Mets is the pitching matchup. I'm going to take the Guardians' first 5 as my pick for this game. For our next game, we go to St. Louis, where the Cardinals are hosting the Orioles. It's Kyle Gibson on the bump for the Cardinals, and it is John Means on the mound for the Orioles. Kyle Gibson, not to be confused with Bob Gibson, the Cardinal great, that's for sure. Kyle Gibson has been getting lit up like we've seen him get lit up in the past. Meanwhile, John Means was once atop of this Orioles rotation. He's been banged up trying to work his way back into things, but definitely susceptible, giving up some runs each time that we've seen him. Both these teams can hit the baseball, but the Orioles are hitting just 219 over their last 10 games, while the Cardinals have picked up the pace, hitting 290, and the Cardinals take it up even another step versus left-handed pitching, hitting 289, while the O's are hitting just 201 versus righties. I think that for me, I'm leaning to go to the Cardinals one more time, a place where we've cashed pretty well. But the thing is, the over just seems like the low-lying fruit, so I'm going to take the over in this game as my pick. For our next game, we go to Houston, where the Astros are hosting the Angels. This is one of those series where it just seemed like the Astros had a big edge coming in, and they just haven't been able to convert. And that's maybe the reason, it's series like this, why the Astros are really struggling overall this season. Hunter Brown goes to the bump for the Astros, and it is Tyler Anderson on the mound for the Angels. Anderson hasn't really had a big season except in his career, except for that season that he pitched for the Dodgers. But actually this season, the lefty hasn't been all that bad. The Astros as a team are hitting 296 over their last 10 games, while the Angels are hitting 267. When it comes to hitting versus lefties, the Astros take it up to 278, while the Angels are hitting at 253. I think the Astros certainly have the edge in the hitting, as they have all series long, but I'll tell you what, the Angels are playing the better baseball, and I like Anderson actually as a better option on the mound. I'm going to roll with the Angels first 5, and that'll be my pick for this game. For our next game, we go to Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City, where the Royals are taking on the Tigers. It's Cole Reagans on the mound for the Royals and Tarek Skubal on the mound for the Tigers. Boy, a lot of people loving on Skubal this year, and well, what's not to love? He has been sensational. Typically a guy throughout his career that when he's on, he is on. And when he's off, he always pays for his mistakes. And we've seen that with Skubal again this season, but most of the time, he's just been on. But this is an interesting matchup because the Royals have really come on strong in this series. As a team, the Royals hitting 269 over their last 10 games. The Tigers picking it up from where they were at 254 now over their last 10. But where the real difference in this game happens is that the Royals are hitting 300 versus left-handed pitching over their last 10, while the Tigers just 158 versus righties. I gotta say, I like the Royals' chances of putting some runs on the board a lot better than I like the Tigers. The Royals are my pick for this first 5 innings. For our next game, we go to Great American Ballpark, where the Cincinnati Reds are taking on the San Diego Padres. It's Nick Martinez on the mound for the Reds and Michael King on the mound for the Padres. Of course, Martinez has been on the Padres fairly recently. Michael King recently acquired by the Padres from the Yankees. But this is still an interesting matchup because for King, in his last 5 starts, he's either given up 6 runs, which he's done 3 times, or he's given up 0 runs. Meanwhile, for Martinez, he gives up runs just about every time out. I think for this one, we look to the hitting, and what we see is that the Padres over the last 10 hitting 247 and the Reds hitting 227. But more interesting than that is versus righties, the Reds are hitting just 218, and the Padres hitting 274 versus right-handed pitching. So I just think we got a team like the Padres hitting against a guy who can get hit. And, well, we're probably going to see the good King today against the light-hitting Reds. I'm going to take the Padres first 5 as my pick for this game. For our next game, we go to Pittsburgh, where the Pirates are taking on the Giants. What a game it was on Tuesday night. Cost me a couple bucks, but, well, had a nice day overall. But the thing is that when we look at this particular game, Blake Snell makes his return to the mound for the Giants. He's been terrible so far this season for what we've seen from him, but it's been over a month since we've seen him take the hill. Got to believe that maybe they feel he's healthy again. Jared Jones on the mound for the Pirates the rookie's been sensational, but his numbers are starting to go the wrong way, giving up 3 runs in his last outing and 2 runs in the outing before that. We look at the hitting for this one. Pittsburgh is hitting 251 as a team over their last 10, while the Giants are hitting 268 over their last 10. Meanwhile, versus left-handed pitching, the Pirates hitting 250 and the Giants hitting 262 over their last 10 versus right-handed pitching. The thing is, I trust Snell at this point 0. We know he has great stuff when he's on, but who knows when that's going to be. I'll take the Pirates first 5, and that'll be my pick for this game. For our next game, we go to Philadelphia, where the Phillies are taking on the Rangers. Of course, two teams always figured to contend, at least in recent years. The Phillies go at Taijuan Walker in this one, while Dane Dunning goes to the bump for the Rangers. You know, the thing is the Rangers pitching staff just a little bit of a mess right now, and certainly would be a different story with Eovaldi and DeGrom if they were back in there, but they're not. As for Walker for the Phillies, generally a guy who has great first half of the seasons, but we haven't seen him be quite as strong as we've seen him in the past. He's only played just a few games at this point. So, we'll see if Walker is able to turn it on. But the thing that hasn't turned it on is Texas hitting. Over the last 10 games, hitting below 200 at 199, while the Phillies at 241. Meanwhile, versus right-handed pitching over the last 10, the Rangers hitting a dreadful 188 and the Phillies at 262. I still think Walker is susceptible, and Dunning certainly is the better arm of these two pitchers. I'm just going to roll with the under in the Rangers-Phillies for the first 5 innings. For our next game, we head to Miami, where the Marlins are taking on the Brewers. This has turned into a very fun series to watch for even the casual baseball fan. If you like seeing lead changes and exciting finishes, well, this has been the series for you. We've got Jesus Luzardo on the bump for the Marlins and Freddie Peralta on the mound for the Brewers. Peralta's numbers have been regressing as the season's gone on. The Brewers have tried to give him extra rest. It hasn't really done anything for him. Meanwhile, Luzardo starting to move closer to the Luzardo that we saw last season after a very rough start. The Marlins are hitting 264 over their last 10 games. The Brewers just 254. But the Brewers had been pounding left-handed pitching, but those numbers are starting to regress, but still 280 versus lefties over their last 10 games, while the Marlins hitting a nice 267 versus righties as well. I just don't like the way Freddie's been pitching, and I like the way Jesus has been pitching. I'm going to take the Marlins first 5 as my pick for this game. For our next game, we head to Tampa Bay, where the Rays are taking on the Red Sox. We've got Brian Bayo on the mound for the Red Sox, and it is Ryan Pepiot returning to the bump for the Tampa Bay Rays. Of course, Pepiot was involved in that Glasnow trade with the Dodgers, and the Rays are really high on him, but we haven't really seen consistency from Pepiot. Thing is, he's got really good stuff, but he's been somewhat inconsistent. For Bayo, we saw him pitch as high as the number 1 in the rotation for the Red Sox last season. He hasn't been quite as good this season, but then again, he was injured as well. When we look at the way these teams are hitting, the Red Sox hitting 242 over their last 10 games, while the Rays 217 versus righties. The Rays slightly better versus 219 over the last 10, while the Red Sox slightly less at 232 versus righties over their last 10 games. I just think Bayo is a way more consistent pitcher than Pepiot. The Red Sox are hitting better. I'm going to take the Red Sox for the first 5 of this game. For our next game, we head to Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, where the Yankees are taking on the Mariners. The Yankees' bats were mystified on Tuesday by Brian Wu, and expect them to come out swinging in this one. Meanwhile, the Seattle Mariners didn't need a lot of offense to get it done against the Yankees on Tuesday. Probably going to take a little bit more effort, though, in this outing. The thing is that when we look at the way these pitchers have been going, Cortez Jr. Not quite as sharp as what we've seen from Bryce Miller, the Seattle starter, but neither of these guys have been absolute stoppers, and both have been susceptible to getting hit. The Mariners are hitting 243 over the last 10, the Yankees at 275, but the Yankees take that up to 278 when facing right-handed pitching, and the Mariners down to 227 when facing a lefty. I really don't love Cortez Jr. I don't love Miller all that much either. I'm going to give a lean to the Yankees in this one, and that'll be my pick for the first 5. For our next game, we go to Toronto, where the Blue Jays are hosting the White Sox. Been a good series so far for both teams. White Sox 5-0 yesterday, getting it done, making amends for the Victoria Day loss. Meanwhile, when we look at the starters for this game, it's Chris Bassett for the Jays and Nick Nastrini for the White Sox. We haven't seen a lot of Nastrini, but what we saw was that he walked a lot of batters and paid the price for those batters that he walked. As for Chris Bassett, the only thing consistent that we've seen from Chris Bassett is inconsistency. He is consistently inconsistent. When it comes to the batting for these two teams, the White Sox are actually hitting a little bit better over their last 10 games, hitting 231 to the Jays 225. When you take it versus right-handed pitching, which is what both sides face today, at least over the first 5 innings, is the White Sox hitting 240 versus righties over the last 10 games, and the Blue Jays hitting 250. To be honest, I think both these pitchers can get lit up. I like the over in the first 5 innings for the Blue Jays White Sox, and that's going to be my pick for this game. For our next game, we head back to Wrigley Field in Chicago, where the Cubs are taking on the Braves. It was a thriller on Tuesday night. A lot of people expecting a high-scoring game with the wind blowing out at Wrigley, but we really didn't get that. What we got was more of a tactical game. In today's game, it's Justin Steele on the mound for the Cubs and Max Fried on the mound for the Braves. Fried, known as a slow starter, got off to a slow start this season. We've seen him still have some bad starts in between, but we've also seen some of his good stuff. Justin Steele was banged up this season. He's been hit harder than we're used to seeing him hit. When we look at how the Cubs are hitting this season, I'll tell you, when it comes to hitting left-handed pitching, they're hitting them at just 202 over their last 10 games, and the Braves at just 216. We look at the overall hitting for these teams the last 10 games, just 197 for the Cubbies and 236 for the Braves. To be honest, I don't love the way Steele's pitching. I don't think the Cubs are hitting good enough. I'm going to go with the Braves in the first 5, and that's going to be my pick for this game. For our next game, we head to Oakland, where the A's are taking on the Rockies. The Rockies getting back to losing on the road after dropping another one on Tuesday, but they played well in the early part of the game, which is all we're concerned about for this video. When we look at this particular game, it's Austin Gomber on the mound for the Rockies and Mitch Spence on the mound for the A's. We've only seen Spence one time. He went 4 1/3 innings, allowing just 1 run over that span. But the thing is, he didn't strike out a lot of batters, so I don't have a lot of faith that he's going to repeat that. Austin Gomber is finally delivering on some of that promise that they believed he had when they traded Nolan Arenado to get him. And I think Gomber, he's going to fly under the radar and maybe be a little bit of value. But what we see here is that the Rockies are absolutely pounding right-handed pitching in their last 10 games at 272, while the A's batting just 100 versus lefties over their last 10 games. We got a good old-fashioned mismatch. I'm taking the Rockies as my pick in this game. For our last game, we head to Los Angeles, where the Dodgers are taking on the Diamondbacks. It's Tyler Glasnow on the mound for the Dodgers and Ryan Nelson on the mound for the D-backs. It was the D-backs getting the win on Tuesday. The Dodgers looking for revenge here. With Nelson, the last time that we saw him for the Diamondbacks, he was giving up runs like no one's business against the Tigers. I had the Diamondbacks that game. He busted up my Nerfy, my first 5 innings, my full game, and I can't even tell you how many parlays along the way. Meanwhile, Glasnow, he cashed for us last time because we had the Reds betting against him as well. To me, not a lot of value on Glasnow these days. He's a good pitcher. He's just not what we see from him. Generally, he's hit or miss. The D-backs hitting 240 over their last 10, while the Dodgers hitting at 226. Meanwhile, versus righties, the D-backs at 251, the Dodgers at 219 over their last 10. I think with these two pitchers on the mound, we're going to see some runs. I like the over in the first 5 in the Dodgers D-backs as our final pick for today's video. That wraps up today's first halves and first 5 inning video. Of course, if you have any comments about the video, it is a new video series. If you have any suggestions, by all means, just put those in the comments. Of course, we're still looking for a name for this video series as well. I'm sure we'll come up with something. I saw a few good suggestions yesterday. If you're looking for our best bets, the games we like the best, always just click on the Premium Picks tab at PickDawgz.com. I've got a link for you in the description. And if you're looking for the cool merch that we wear, like the hats, the shirts, the hoodies, the zip-ups, all that sort of stuff, new golf shirts we have for PickDawgz, go to PickDawgz.com, click on the merch tab. Let's have a winning day. I'll see you guys tomorrow with more first halves and first 5 innings.